Assalamualaikum everyone. Welcome to the R&I department's first podcast of the season, courtesy of LCG. My name is Sairam and Miran, and I'm a freshman at the law school. And along with me, I have my co-host Hadiya, Saroya, and our guest Ms Sana Ahmad. So today we'll be talking generally about an introduction to the consulting sector that you all need to know in Pakistan. And the second part of our podcast will be related to Ms Sana Ahmad's journey at LUMS and how it transitioned into her career in consulting. Hadiya, would you like to introduce our guest for today?
Sure. So our guest is actually a graduate from the Lahore University of Management Sciences. She graduated with an accounting and finance degree in 2019, and she is currently an associate consultant at Intellia Advisors. So Sana, how has your day been?
My day's been good. It's been very intense at work. I was working nonstop from 9 to 6. I just took some time off for this, but it's good. We're on an interesting project these days.
Well, we have a question for you about the work-life balance. But before that, I'm sure your career journey has been quite interesting, right? Would you like to share a little bit of that with us?
So this was actually my first job out of LUMS. So initially, I think that during my time at LUMS, I didn't really think of consulting as a career because I wasn't very interested in moving outside of Lahore. So for me, I didn't know that there were any firms in Lahore that were doing work at the scale that McKinsey, etc., are doing. And I thought that if I'm going to go into consulting or wherever I'm going to go, I want to work at the best of the best, doing all this interesting work. And I actually happened across Intellia around the time that I interviewed for Intellia. I was actually almost headed for my master's, which I ended up deferring and decided not to go. And I ended up liking this line of work so much that ultimately I chose to not do my master's at the time because that was in a very different field. It was in operations research, and ultimately, I really enjoyed my first year and since then as well. So I sort of happened across consulting, and I think it was a very good fit for me because I like to think analytically. I like to solve problems, thinking outside the box, researching, putting your findings together in a way that is that communicates it very well to the reader. All of these things really spoke to me. So I felt like consulting was a very natural fit. And since I've joined Intellia, I've grown really well throughout the company as well. I've learned so much at this company. I feel like the learning curve was incredible. I felt like I've learned so much so fast.
Right. Well, that's wonderful, Sana, and I think that you seem very glad with your decision to join Intellia.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So, how has your overall experience been with consultancy, with Intellia?
With consultancy, I think that the best thing about it, in my opinion, is the way that every single project is so different and the way that every single client is so different. So you won't ever get bored. If that's something that you like, fast-paced work, that is always something new, always something engaging, different industry, entirely different field. You just think you became an expert at some consumer product. Your next project is like public policy, and now you're learning so much about something else. So my experience with that has been really incredible, learning so many different things, not just, in any career that you choose, the first few years, you're going to learn a lot. But with this, you get to learn things that are from such a wide selection of industries.
Yeah, that's a very interesting insight. So, since I'm a law major, and you mentioned that in consulting, you don't really, it's so diverse and you don't really have to stick to one particular thing. And you also mentioned how your field was really different to where you are today now. So, do you think there's one particular major or something that you would want for consulting, or do you think that practically anybody who studied anything at university can get into consulting?
I think anybody that studied anything can get into consulting, and that's our hiring practice as well. And it's the same across BCG, McKinsey, the Big Four. It doesn't matter what your background is educationally, it doesn't matter. You can be from arts, you can be from law. We recently hired a film major it really doesn't matter, because most of the skills that you need to know, you will learn on the job. And the most important thing, it sounds cliche, but the most important thing that you bring is your problem solving skills. I know that sounds like something that's in every job description, think critically, have good problem solving skills, but that's literally what you need. Every single day, we hit roadblocks when it comes to research. We hit roadblocks when the client asks for something and we feel like we don't have enough time to do it. You think outside the box, you come up with solutions. And I think the other thing is just have whatever it is that you've done, maybe have some research experience. I think that always helps. So say you've done law, but if you have some experience researching, like a research project, even if that's within law, I think that's really valuable.
That's good news. If somewhere along my law degree, I don't want to go to courts. Back to you, Hadiya.
Right. Thank you, Sana. That was wonderful to hear. What do you think about consulting within the Pakistani context?
So I think that it's still growing here. I think that the industry is still maturing. I think that Pakistani clients are not very used to working with consultants. They're not very mature clients, which is why we actually don't have any Pakistani clients at the moment. I don't think I've worked with any client in Pakistan since I've joined. And I think that, but I think it's just so great for me to see just the way that Intellia has even grown. And just, I see people at McKinsey in Karachi, and it's just, the field is growing. And I feel like even around the world, there's more interest in Pakistan as a place where, a lot of good talent like this can come from. And I think that, honestly, like as I grow, I would love to work with more Pakistani clients as well. But for me, I think that the culture has been really incredible. And I know that that's not the case in every firm here, be it consulting or not. I know that's something that people often struggle with. So to have a very flat sort of structure, everyone's doing all kinds of work. I'm an associate, but I'll still find myself doing research work. If an intern needs help, I'll jump on. If I have 2 hours free during my day, even if I have back-to-back meetings and I'm leading a project, if someone else needs help with like something that's very basic, or even if they don't need help, but there's like a task that needs to be done, I'll do it. And it's the same for our directors. Like there's been times where they've helped me with research, like very basic. Here's like share screen. If you Google this, you might be able to get this. So that's been very enjoyable for me, honestly. Like it's not, no one's stuck in their roles. No one's stuck in hierarchy. I think that that's been a really important thing that I have not seen very much in Pakistan.
Well, all of this sounds great because a lot of people at LCG do intern at Intellia. So I'm sure they'd love to hear what you said. You mentioned foreign clients, which was very interesting. So how do you think working with people outside of Pakistan, how do you think that's perhaps changed your perspective?
I think that it's really raised the bar in some cases where, at first I was so new to consulting, I didn't even know what sort of analysis was needed. And then, the first few months, like straight up, I'm in client calls, and not only am I talking to like C-level executives at multinationals, but they're like, so many of them are ex-BCG or ex-McKinsey. And so not only are they at the top of their field in the company that they're at right now, but they also have so much consulting experience. So very mature clients. And their expectations are exactly as you would think with their level of experience. So if we're producing slides or a report or a model, it can't be fluff. It can't just be stuff that you've copy pasted from like the about section of different companies or anything like that. It has to be hard insights. Like they will ask you about every single slide. What is the point of the slide? What is the point you're trying to make? What is the insight over here? What is the recommendation? So I think that's something that I've learned. The more mature a client, the harder they are to please, and the more you get to learn. And that's something you get from all these big companies abroad.
All right. You did mention that the work-life balance was sometimes a bit off. So, there's some stereotypes about consulting, about the workload, about the culture. So would you think that they're true?
I think that I don't think that I would say that the work-life balance is off. So, for example, today was an intense day, but today my day was 9 to 6. So I might log on again just to check up on some things, but I think pretty much I'm done for the weekend. I don't think I have anything else to do this weekend. However, sometimes if I'm on a tight deadline, I'm managing a project and certain things need to go out to the client, I'll work the weekend if it needs to go out. However, generally, especially on longer projects, it's a few months long. I will be able to plan ahead, or whoever's managing that project will be able to plan ahead, and we can pace ourselves. But sometimes a client will come back at the 11th hour and be like, we need these edits, and then we get them done. And honestly, by that point, your project is like your baby, so you're happy to do it. And I think that the work-life balance has generally been good. So if I have a 4-month project that I'm working on, and there's 4 major deadlines, so that's the late hours, or working a weekend, or not even the entire weekend, but maybe working a few hours on a Saturday or a Sunday, that's going to happen once a month or something, right? But that said, the work is very fast paced. So you need to, a lot of it is very critical thinking intensive as well. So it's not just, adding data here and there, and just you have to be thinking all the time. So that is something that you or whoever's watching, if they enjoy, I think that they'll like it very much. I think that the consulting memes and all the stereotypes, I feel like it's not as bad as they say, at least in my experience. I think that there's a lot of times in a project where it's very relaxed. I also think it really matters what the culture is like. We've been working from home for a while now, but we're finally back at the physical office in parts. So some days on, some days off. But it's just reminded me, I mean, I've been here when the office was open as well, but just that banter and that sort of friendship that we all have, we're working intensely as well, but when we take breaks, everyone's joking around. And that's from whether I'm an associate, analyst, if our directors are at the office, they're joking around with us as well. I've just found that everyone that I've worked with is an interesting person outside of work as well. And I think that's a really important part of our hiring process. And I think the hiring process across companies at this point. Are you passionate about things outside of work? What sort of a person are you? How well do you fit into the team? So yes, the work can be intense sometimes, but I think that we also have a lot of fun at the office, which is nice for me because I enjoy that.
Right.
That's great. Sairam?
Yeah. So bad working hours is something that consulting is notorious for, but what it's famous for is really good compensation. So I mean, you don't have to, of course, give me exact figures or industry secrets, but to all of the LUMS undergraduates here watching and who want a lucrative career, where do you place consulting in terms of compensation?
I think that generally consultants get paid quite well. I think that once you graduate, there's quite a bit of variation as well. Like banks, for example, are known for not paying very well straight up, and then it improves over time. I think consulting, from what I know of across companies, does pay very well. And it's towards the higher end of the spectrum for fresh grads especially. And I also think that there's in certain companies, so this also varies from company to company, so anywhere you go, you will, if you're in a startup or a smaller company or a more dynamic sort of structure, if you do very well, you can progress faster, and that will also obviously translate to compensation. I understand that like the bigger companies sometimes have a very fixed structure, like 2 years and then you get your first promotion, 3 years and then you get your second one. So that's always something to consider. But I think that consulting is a good choice for that.
Right. Good to hear. So, Sana, an important part of the culture at LCG is gender parity. We believe in equal access to opportunities for boys and girls. So, as a woman in consulting, could you talk a little bit about the importance of strong female representation in the field?
Absolutely. I feel like that's something that we are moving towards as like a world slowly and steadily. I think we still have like a long way to go, but it is always like exactly what you said. When you see strong female representation, it is inspiring and it also puts you at ease. So when I joined Intellia, it was so my engagement managers, like 2 of them were women, and both of our engagement managers at the time were women. And I remember that sort of thing just puts you at ease. It makes you realize that, there is growth potential over here. So one of the things that I would always recommend to fresh grads and seniors as they're looking to join a company is to look at the company structure. You can usually find that on LinkedIn. Have a look, see if you would have mentors that are women in positions that you would like to see yourself in maybe 10 years. I think that's a great place to start. And I think that the other thing that you can always do to make sure that you sort of end up at a company that has that, where you progress if you do well, and that's like all that basically matters, is maybe talk to maybe someone from your university that works there. I feel like there's no better way than that to find out. But you're absolutely right. That is something that I think factors in a lot for women when they're joining the workforce. Am I going to be treated exactly the same as any man? Are my skills, if I do X amount of work, is it going to be rewarded the same way? And I think that the other thing that's super important there is a very structured sort of a hiring process and a very structured performance evaluation process. Because if it's not structured, if there aren't like metrics that you're, being very specific about, if there's no accountability or transparency in the process, bias comes in of hiring managers or whoever's evaluating. I think not just in consulting, but anywhere you go, structure, transparency, accountability in this process is what we need to achieve gender parity.
All right. I'm sure this, you as a guest and this podcast will inspire a lot of girls to join consultancy, if that's one thing that we can hope for. Sairam, you had...
So.
Yep, me too. Sairam, I think you had some questions.
Yes, Sana. So I'll be taking over from this part of the podcast and we'll be talking about LUMS now. So let's talk more about LUMS. So although this podcast is generally aimed at every single person who is looking to research about consulting in Pakistan, a large proportion of our audience will be LUMS undergraduates looking to transition from their final years of university into their first years of consulting. So could you walk us through how that transition was for you and how LUMS in particular helped to kickstart your career?
I think that the places where LUMS really came through for me was, I think that during my time at LUMS, we did a lot of projects. Like I feel like at least 2 of my courses every single semester had a project in them. And that really prepares you for both teamwork and leadership within teams. And I feel like that's come in so much in consulting because we are always working with teams and our teams keep changing. So on every single project, we will have a new team. And sometimes you're working with the same people as last time, but it shuffles a lot. And I think that that ability to work in different settings with different people, get to know different people, I think that was invaluable. I think the other thing is LUMS, I really think, does put good work ethic in you. I think in order to do well, you do need to sometimes it can be very rigorous, right? And I think that that's something that I definitely carried. So even when I wasn't doing anything that I had done before. So, for example, when I was doing certain types of research that I'd never done in LUMS before, I still carried that work ethic with me to approach everything with an open mind, to put my best in, even when, you're not sure what you're doing, you're new to it. I think that the other thing that really helped was that we do quite a fair bit of research, and we are pretty familiar after a time at LUMS, familiar with the basics of PowerPoint and Excel. Not necessarily required, honestly, but nice to have. We do trainings for it. I think all the big firms do trainings for it, but good to have.
Right, makes sense. So talking about projects, sometimes people don't really do great at projects, like people like me. So the next question is very important and kind of controversial. What do you think is the role of GPA in hiring from consultants? Like if you were hiring someone, what importance would you give to GPA?
That's a good question. So I think that it matters, but I think that you shouldn't let it scare you away. So I know there's a lot of talk of like you need like above like a 3.6 or 3.4. They don't even look at your resume or stuff like that. But I think that's not all there is to it. I think that even if I'm looking through a resume, yeah, I look at the GPA maybe, but I'm more interested to see what your experience is. I'm more interested to see what projects you've done at LUMS, your description of them, what sort of projects were they, what role did you play? I think that that's something that's always very important. I think the other thing that so it's sort of holistic, you look at everything together. And I think that another thing that people sometimes don't realize that actually we do look at, and I think more and more firms are looking at it, the section right at the end of the CV that sometimes you skip and even take it out, hobbies or other interests, we honestly do look at it. And I think a lot of the times people tend to not put too much thought into that and just put something down like reading or something that's not necessarily something that they're too passionate about. I would say most of us do have something or the other that we're very passionate about, whatever it is, like whatever that is for you. Is it a particular sport? Do you like to swim? Do you like to read? Maybe you like to bake. Maybe you're interested in film. It could be anything. Maybe you're like a workout fanatic. Anything in the world, put something interesting in there that says something about your personality. Because when you're in an interview, apart from your work, generally there is some sort of a culture fit interview at most firms, or there is some part of the interview process where the interviewer just wants to get to know you as a person. How would you fit into the team when we're working late nights or when we're, on lunch break? What sort of a person are you to hang out with as well, like I said earlier, like I feel like every single person on this team is such an interesting person. So I guess I would say don't shy away from mentioning whatever it is that you're interested in and whatever it is that you're passionate about, because it just shows that when you care about something, you go all out about it, or there's something that you're super interested in, everything about that sport, every statistic, whatever it is for you. So don't shy away from letting your personality and your personal interests come through in an interview or in a resume. So GPA, yes, it matters, but it is one of many things. And if you feel that your GPA is maybe lower than other people that you know that are applying, don't worry about it. Apply anyway. Ace the case study. I understand that by the time you're in like your junior year, senior year, your GPA is a little bit set, right? There's only so much you can do. It's not a big deal. Like just study hard for the case study part. Research the company that you're applying to really well. All of these things really make a difference. There's more to the hiring process than the GPA.
That's very interesting and something that not a lot of us knew. And you're right, we did skip the last parts of the CV. So my next question is more about skills as opposed to hobbies. And what are some, you talked about some of the skills that consulting demands. You have to have good research skills and good, let's say, presentation skills, and in particular, a good work ethic. But how could one person develop them during their undergraduate years, right? So research understood, but how do you develop other skills that consulting needs, for instance, problem solving? How do you develop them under your 4 years at undergraduate years?
That's a good question. So I think that the best places that, or the places where I found I've done work most relevant to the kind of work I do right now is again the kinds of projects that you do during your time at LUMS. So there's always like, a spectrum of what you can choose when you're doing that project. So you can choose to challenge yourself or you can choose to kind of play it safe. Sometimes we have projects that are like interview someone at a company and write a report on it or something. And I've been there. Sometimes you're so overworked, you find a company where you already know someone. They put you in touch with a contact, you do a quick interview, write a quick report, and you're done. I would say push yourself a little, challenge yourself. Think about, a lot of us focus bahut zyada on like work experience. We have to get the perfect internship. Those projects that you do are a really good opportunity. It's something you can talk about later in your interview. I would say spend more time doing that, because if you come up with an interesting topic that is more challenging for you, you will, your problem solving skills and your critical thinking skills will be challenged. If you're chasing someone down at a company that you don't know, you're going to feel a lot more challenged than reaching out to someone that you do know. So, for example, for one of my projects at LUMS, we had to build a sort of a model for any company. And we decided we wanted to do a gym, and we didn't know anyone that owned a gym. So we physically went to like Shapes and there was no one there. There obviously there's nobody there that can, there's just reception staff and trainers. And then we went around different gyms, and finally we found ourselves at Structure. And they're luckily there, someone that was on their strategy or management team was there, and he'd done an MBA from LUMS, so he was very receptive to us. And that's how we got her into like someone that worked at a gym that would let us do a project on them. So find something that interests you, find something more challenging. It will force you to think more critically. I think that that's something that's very important. And I think in terms of other skills, like I was saying, stuff that's nice to have, I wouldn't say that any of these skills are needed to get your foot through the door. So you can get hired either way, and you can go through the trainings and you can learn on the job. But if there's a few things that will make it easier once you've joined to sort of hit the ground running, would maybe be maybe learn the basics of Excel. I feel like that comes in handy in most places. I know it's not really a core for HSS or law. Just look up the basics, honestly, like a very basic course. Super helpful wherever you go, whether that's consulting or not.
Right. So you touched a little bit on networking in this one of your answers, and that's very interesting. So at LCG, when all of us were having our induction and everybody was meeting each other, so there was this one question where you had to ask, why did you join LCG? And a lot of very honest gentlemen were like, oh, we just want to network here. Could you elaborate on that and tell us what exactly networking is and how important is it to get into consulting?
I think that it's good sometimes to have maybe a senior, someone that you know that's already working at that firm that can refer you. And that's always helpful. But I think at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need it. So for example, if you happen to know someone at one of the consulting firms, and for some reason you want to join the other one a little bit more, it's your preference, don't let that hold you back. I would recommend drop your CV and also reach out to a few people on LinkedIn. I think that, especially since we're speaking more to the LUMS community, if you look up any company's LinkedIn, I think that usually there is at least one LUMS graduate there. Reach out to them, tell them you're just graduating, tell them you want to learn more about the company. Ask them what you can maybe do to increase your chances for the hiring process. So I guess that's also networking in some form, but don't let there is more to it than just the traditional method of getting to know people more when you're at university or when you're at work. And you can always reach out, and people are a lot more helpful than you would think. I know it's terrifying messaging a random person, especially at the company where you want to interview at, but people are a lot more receptive than you think. And if you are worried that someone else might have like a reference or they might know someone, usually, honestly, that's not what makes it or breaks it. I have personally referred people, and then as they move through the hiring process, some get hired and some don't, And there's people that come in with absolutely no reference and they get hired. So it's important if you want to get to know more about the company and learn more about the company. But if you don't know anyone, reach out, you'll find someone.
Right. Thank you, Sana. It's very, I'm very happy to know that at least one sector is free from nepotism in Pakistan. With that, that was our final question. Thank you so much for coming. And my key takeaways from this podcast, I think, would be that consulting is not as intimidating or as exclusive as one would think it is. So one has to relax as an undergraduate. But at the same time, it also not only making pretty slides. There's a lot of hard work and hard hours and work ethic involved. One more interesting thing that you could say is that GPA is important, but there's other things to it. And everybody just focus on the last parts of your CV where it says hobbies. Thank you so much for coming, Sana. I'd like to hand it over to Hadiya now.
Sana, I cannot express how wonderful it was to finally hear from you. I think my takeaway would be that the world as we know it is changing, consultancy is changing, perhaps traditions and stereotypes don't hold that much weight anymore. So thank you so much for letting us know a little bit about this. And again, it was wonderful to have you. Sairam, I think you wanted to ask.
So Hadiya, thank you, Hadiya. So Sana, there's people who, for instance, imagine that somebody has skipped through the entire podcast. They're not in the mood to watch it, and they just skip to this moment. What would very briefly be a summary and a short piece of advice for every undergraduate at LUMS right now, where you could sort of sum up this whole podcast?
I would say don't worry so much about what your major is. Don't let that hold you back. Don't worry so much about your GPA. If consulting is something you're passionate about, and that doesn't mean that you have to know a lot about it. If you like the thought of a job where you get to know about a lot of different fields, it's fast-paced, you learn new things all the time, you think critically, you like to problem solve, consulting could be something you're passionate about. Work on the interview, work on the case study part of it, beef up your CV with interesting projects, things that you're passionate about, and give it a shot, honestly. It is not as hard or as intimidating as it looks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sana, for coming. That's it from our side.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, guys.